An Undeceptions podcast.
Good night.
Good night.
I'm a friend of Sarah Connor. I was told that she's here. Could I see her, please?
No, can't see her. She's making a statement.
Where is she?
Look, it may take a while. If you want to wait, there's a bench over there.
I'll be back.
That, of course, was Arnold Schwarzenegger in his role as the human-like cyborg T-800 in the 1984 sci-fi action blockbuster, The Terminator. Even if you've never seen the film, shame on you, chances are you're familiar with Arnie's immortal line, "I'll be back," uttered to a very unfortunate police officer. As promised, he does return, crashing a car through the walls of a police station, going on a rampage in an attempt to reach his actual target, who's hiding there in the station. Culture doesn't get more refined than The Terminator. Fascinatingly though, writer and director James Cameron conceived the idea for a film about a murderous cyborg assassin after having a dream. Speaking to acclaimed film writer George Bass, Cameron recalled, quote, "The Terminator came from a dream that I had while I was sick with a fever in a cheap pensione, a little hotel room, in Rome in 1981. It was the image of a chrome skeleton emerging from a fire. When I woke up, I began sketching on the hotel stationery." That dream yielded a film franchise that has grossed nearly $2 billion worldwide, won 4 Academy Awards, all for Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which was awesome, and redefined the entire ski-fee genre. Can I do that? Can I just let that hang?
Please.
Yeah. Okay. Cameron's dream altered cinematic history, you might say. Coming up with an idea for an action anti-hero is one thing, but dreams have been hugely consequential to human history. Arguably, the one with the most far-reaching geopolitical implications was that of Roman Emperor Constantine, whose dream before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD was, allegedly, instrumental in his conversion to Christianity. If that's true, then it's a dream that changed the course of global history. Throughout the Bible, there are multiple instances of God communicating through dreams, perhaps most famously with Joseph via an angel with the news that his pregnant fiancée hadn't been unfaithful to him and that she was actually about to give birth to the Messiah. We all dream, but do our dreams ever mean anything? The Bible is surprisingly open-ended on that one. It's an idea we explored back in 2023 in Season 9 of Undeceptions, and to date, it's our second most popular episode ever. That is so weird because I remember telling director Mark and producer Kaylee, who came up with the idea, that it'll never work. And it worked. Weird. But we're going to revisit that one today. I'm John Dixon, and I am back with this Undeceptions Rewind. From antiquity, right through the Middle Ages, the Enlightenment, and on into the modern era, humanity has asked the question, why do we dream? And do dreams mean something? Both Islam and Christianity have examples of revelatory dreams in their scriptures. Buddhism and Hinduism view dreams as part of the path to enlightenment. The Jewish Talmud states, "A dream which is not interpreted is like a letter which is not read." Yeah, I'm a bit skeptical. I know there are plenty of dreams in the Bible, and so as someone who really does believe the Bible, I'm kind of stuck with dreams, at least the ones that are in Scripture. But do dreams continue to have significance, psychologically, physically, spiritually. Are our dreams full of messages and warnings? For most of human history, that's been the common view. The ancient texts of many cultures contain dream accounts that are interpreted as omens or communications from the supernatural world, from the gods, the ancestors, or the spirits. In the 19th century, dreams began to be studied more scientifically, sort of. Perhaps there's something going on in our brains that causes us to dream. Then comes along Sigmund Freud and his approach to dream analysis, coded versions of wish fulfillment, which some psychologists and sleep specialists now actually think is just a blip, a distraction that took us away from the really scientific advancement of the study of dreams.
The problem about dreaming has been that it's been the preserver of sort of psychoanalysts for a long period of time, which of course, with the best will of the world, can be only described as a subjective science. And I think many neuroscientists have stayed away from dreaming because we haven't really had the tools to look at it very carefully. That's changing. And so, for example...
That's Professor Russell Foster, Director of the Sleep and Circadian Neuroscience Institute at the University of Oxford in the UK. Russell is an expert on all things sleep and a brilliant communicator on the subject, as you're going to hear. He's delivered TED Talks and even coached Hollywood actors on how to harness sleep for peak performance. Link in the show notes for that. Last year, Russell published the book titled Lifetime. That's 2 words. The New Science of the Body Clock and How It Can Revolutionize Your Sleep and Health. He's also the co-author of the Oxford Very Short Introduction to Sleep, which is highly recommended. In fact, my darling buff has become sick of my sideline obsession with sleep science.
And so, for example, with brain imaging studies, you can start to sort of look at the sleeping brain during different REM versus non-REM states. And it's during REM sleep where we have our most vivid and complicated dreams. So we said that in slow-wave sleep, slow-wave non-REM sleep, we're processing information. But what's going on during REM sleep where we're having our dreams? And the consensus at the moment seems to be that we're processing some of our emotional issues. So what's turned out to be fascinating, and there were some lovely studies that looked at dream content in New Yorkers after the Twin Towers were destroyed by terrorist action. And they weren't dreaming about planes crashing into skyscrapers, which would have been, in a sense, sort of a recapitulation of the event, a post-traumatic stress response, but they were having anxiety dreams. So, for example, being overwhelmed by a tsunami or being mugged. And so this has led to the suggestion that we're dealing with our anxieties. And so, for example, some brain imaging studies have suggested that information that we've taken in during the day, sort of temporarily stored in the brain in the hippocampus. There's a bit of it in the brain called the amygdala, which is dealing with our emotional responses, and the neocortex, which is sort of keeping our longer-term memory. And during REM sleep, these 3 structures seem to interact and could be processing emotional content. And of course, I mean, many people get quite anxious about nightmares and dreams. And most of the time, you don't need to worry about it at all because it's the brain doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is making sense of a very complicated, often emotionally charged world.
I guess the golden question, and therefore answer, is around why do we need to sleep so much? I mean, for physical recovery, I think I read in your book, we probably don't need all those hours for physical recovery. And evolutionarily, it's bloomin' dangerous to be asleep for 8 hours. So why?
Well, the last bit you said, it's dangerous to be asleep. Well, actually, it's more dangerous to move around within an environment to which you're poorly adapted. And I think that's one of the really important evolutionary selection pressures for sleep. Essentially, way back, we've got this internal circadian clock. And, what it's used for is to anticipate the different needs of the rest and the activity cycle. And in a sense, no species is equally effective across the 24-hour day. We've almost made an evolutionary decision to be active at a particular part of the day-night cycle. and we've evolved specializations to allow us to work optimally at that time. If you think about an owl, it works brilliantly at night. It works far less effectively during the day. We simply don't have the sensory capabilities to function optimally, wandering around our environment, the natural environment in the darkness. So part of the evolutionary pressure, I think, for sleep has been actually to take us away from moving around within an environment to which we're poorly adapted. Now, having made that decision of specialization, we then say, well, hang on, I've got to do all this important biology. So if I've been experiencing all this, information overload during the day, I need to start to sort it out. So I park it. And then when I'm not moving around and I'm not taking lots more information in, I can start to process it. So it's sort of compartmentalizing stuff in time. And of course, that compartmentalization makes it really efficient. We're not flipping backwards and forwards endlessly between different sorts of physiological states. So I think actually we potentially could be more vulnerable to predators. We've got pretty effective predator, anti-avoidance to predators whilst we're asleep. But moving around, whilst we're asleep and not being adapted to that environment could be much worse for us.
Am I oversimplifying it then to see a pattern here that sleep per se is sorting out the cognition and dreams, the other aspect of sleep, are dealing with the emotion? Is that too much like a pattern, or is there something in it?
I think there's something in it. I suspect, as with everything, it's going to be more complicated than that. But I think as a shorthand to think about the different stages of sleep and why we sleep on our cognitive and our emotional behaviors, I think it's a perfectly reasonable way of thinking about it.
7 years of bumper crops are on their way. Years of plenty, endless wheat and tons of hay. Your farms will boom, there won't be room to store the surplus food you grow. After that, the future doesn't look so bright. Egypt's luck will change completely overnight, and famine's hand will stock the land with food an all-time low. Noble king, there is no doubt what your dreams are all about. All these things you saw in your pajamas are a long-range forecast for your farmers, and I'm sure it's crossed your mind what it is you have to find. Find a man to lead you through the famine with a flair for economic planning. But who this man could be, I just don't know.
That's a clip from the 1999 film version of Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice's musical Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, starring Donny Osmond as Joseph. Whatever happened to Donny Osmond? The silly but strangely addictive musical follows Joseph from the Book of Genesis, who finds himself in the court of an Egyptian pharaoh who's having strange dreams that no one can interpret. Joseph, a gifted dream interpreter, has a go. In the musical, the pharaoh recites his dream in his best Elvis imitation. He dreams of 7 fat cows, 7 skinny cows, 7 healthy ears of corn, and 7 dead ears of corn. It's actually fairly close to the biblical version of events, which you can read in Genesis chapter 41, except don't imagine Elvis through the story. That scene we just heard is Joseph interpreting Pharaoh's dream. Egypt is going to have 7 good years of harvest, followed by 7 bad years. Pharaoh listens to Joseph's interpretation, which Joseph says has come from God. Egypt plans well, and the 7 bad years don't result in a famine. Joseph is promoted to Pharaoh's right-hand man. It's one of several dream interpretation stories in the Bible. Daniel in the Old Testament is also celebrated as a dream interpreter. And the prophet Joel predicted, quote, "I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams." That's a passage that the Apostle Peter quotes in the New Testament as somehow fulfilled among Christians. But then in the book of Jeremiah in the Old Testament, God warns his people about false prophets who merely say they dream dreams.
I have heard what the prophets say, who prophesy lies in my name. They say, I had a dream, I had a dream. How long will this continue in the hearts of these lying prophets, who prophesy the delusions of their own minds? Therefore, declares the Lord, I am against the prophets who steal from one another words supposedly from me. Yes, declares the Lord, I am against the prophets who wag their own tongues and yet declare, the Lord declares. Indeed, I am against those who prophesy false dreams, declares the Lord.
When it came to dreams, in the Bible the stakes were high. And the early Christians took these scriptural warnings to heart when it came to figuring out their own dreams. Okay, so let's focus on Christianity in particular. Early Christianity values dreams as communications from beyond. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Early Christianity was careful about dreams, as they'd learnt to be from the Judeo tradition of especially the wisdom books.
That's Bronwyn Neal, Professor of Ancient History at Macquarie University, back in my hometown of Sydney. She's an expert on Byzantine and medieval Christianity. Part of her research involved understanding the social background of antiquity and the early Middle Ages, a world in which dreams were taken very, very seriously.
So Solomon, Wisdom of Solomon, and some of the prophets were also quite ambivalent about, or they warned people about accepting all dreams as being from the divine, and they had to be discerned. The meaning of them had to be discerned, and also the source, because if God could send you dreams, then the devil or demons could also send you dreams. So
yes, because divination was, of course, outlawed in Judaism, but dreams sort of sit somewhere in that fuzzy space?
Yeah, so Christian dreams are really, the theory of dream interpretation comes from Judaism, but also from ancient Greco-Roman divination traditions. And they allowed divination, they even encouraged it.
Was there any formal difference between dreams and, say, visions or prophetic speech?
Yes. Well, one lovely saying from the Talmud, from the Babylonian Talmud, is that dreams are only 1/24 of prophecy.
The Talmud is a collection of Jewish laws, civil, moral, ceremonial, with parable and history thrown in. Combined, it's about 22 volumes at the edition I'm looking at on my bookshelf right now. And the divination that Bronwyn is talking about, aside from Hogwarts' school subject in Harry Potter, is the practice of determining hidden meanings in menial everyday events. This often included trying to decode the future through things like reading the flight patterns of birds, the casting of lots with animal bones, reading into star signs like horoscopes, observing how the sacred chickens ate their food, true story, and you guessed it, dreams. The Bible comes down pretty hard on divination. There shall not be anyone among you who practices divination or tells fortunes or interprets omens or a sorcerer. That's Deuteronomy. Despite all this, in both later Christian Byzantine culture and Islamic culture, ancient pagan dream techniques were put to monotheistic use, resulting in whole books being published known as dream key manuals.
They're a very small part of prophecy, and it appears again in the Hadith about the Quran that dreams are a 1/40th part of prophecy. So they were seeing as a small part, but as you know, prophecy had to be interpreted. It wasn't, at least in the New Testament, prophetic. The prophetic gift was one that had to be practiced with discernment, and maybe you'd give the prophecy and somebody else would interpret it for the community. So they were always conscious that it was a dangerous activity and it had to be regulated.
So did they think all dreams were spiritually significant, or just the ones that freaked you out?
Mainly the ones that freaked you out. So the more clear, the more vivid, that was more likely. And also if a prophetic messenger appeared like a saint, or in the Christian times, Mary, the Mother of God, might appear, those saints would look. They had to have kind of authentic appearance. and they were often white. The angels and the saints appeared in white raiment. They were always beautiful. They were usually young. So they were all signs that this was a divinely ordained dream. But they recognised that dreams could be natural phenomena as well, produced by too much eating, too much drinking, or the opposite, too little food or drink. So, yes, you find this fine line between recognising that, eating cheese before you go to bed might produce nightmares. But on the other hand, fasting could be a way to bring on such dreams that did have divine significance. So prayer and fasting often accompanied monastic visions. But as far as the terminology goes, you don't get a very clear-cut distinction between dreams and visions. They're used almost... Visions are usually, prioritised as being more likely divine, and dreams can be either.
Okay, so tell me how this worked. Let's just say I'm a Christian in Constantinople in the 500s, and I have a crazy dream. I don't know, that I get up and kill someone or something, and then I wake up from this terrible dream. What do I do? What would be kind of an advised process to get to the bottom of it?
So if you were really a believer, you might go to your priest and ask your priest to interpret it.
So priests generally had this gig, did they?
It's not really encouraged, but it seems like it happened a lot. Let's say that. So technically, priests were more and more discouraged from doing dream divination. But in the Byzantine Church, if you didn't want to just go to your own dream dictionary and look up what does it mean if I killed someone, and then there might be sub-meanings like if you're poor and you killed a rich person, it means this. And if you're rich and you killed a poor person, or you killed a woman, or you killed someone in your family, it means that. So that there could be lots of layered strands of interpretation. So you had to find somebody that knew like all the conditions. So time of year might be taken into account, or what weapon you used, or particularly who was the victim. They all kind of contributed to. And sometimes things that you would think would be negative could be interpreted very positively. Like if you killed a prostitute, that might be seen as you're going to enjoy a long marriage, because you killed that part of your life, killed off that part of your life. So And
I hope if you're a rich man and you dreamt about killing a poor man, the message is you're going to hell if you don't repent. Is that how that worked too?
No, it's not that simple, really. It might be taken as that means success in business.
Yikes. Across the millennia, people have been influenced by and then acted upon what they believed were divine messages in dreams. I'm not a fan, but I find the whole thing fascinating. But what about in our modern, rational, science-driven world? Are there still credible stories of people encountering spirits or even the Christian God through dreams? I hesitate. But according to an increasing number of converts to Christianity from a particular cultural background, the answer is absolutely.
Of course, when I went to Mecca, I was going there in order to pay homage to the Kaaba and to fulfill the requirements in Islam. But that night, I saw Jesus in a dream. First, Jesus touched my forehead with his finger. And after touching me, he said, "You belong to me." And then he touched me above my heart. "You have been saved. Follow me." "You belong to me," he said. So I decided, okay, I am not going to finish the Hajj, the pilgrimage. Whatever it takes, I am going to follow that voice.
That's a clip from the Christian Broadcast Network in the US, with a translator telling the story of Ali, who took a Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca, but had a dream about Jesus and decided to find out more about Christianity. He's not the only one to report converting to Christianity after having a dream about Jesus. A study published in Christianity Today magazine back in 2007 surveyed 750 Muslim converts on how it was that they came to call themselves Christians. 27% of respondents said that they had divine dreams or visions just before their conversion, with that number climbing to 40% experiencing spiritual dreams around the time they converted to Christianity. Another study by Mission Frontiers found a quarter of Muslims surveyed listed divine dreams, including encounters with Jesus himself, as a key factor in their conversion. Muslims, in particular Shia Muslims, do have a strong cultural openness to revelatory dreams, with ample precedent found in the Muslim holy book, the Quran. Interestingly, there are patterns that can be observed in these dream encounters. An article in the Gospel Coalition observed 4 common factors in conversion dreams. They were 1, Jesus speaking scripture to them, even scripture they'd never heard before. 2, Jesus telling people to do something. 3, a dream or vision that led to a feeling of being clean or at peace. And 4, a man in white physically appearing. Hey, 2025, John jumping in here. We had an incredible interview in this episode with Nima Alizadeh, who's the head of the Farsi arm of the Gospel Coalition, and he met Jesus in a dream. Nima grew up in Iran in a context where becoming a Christian was incredibly dangerous. You'll have to tune in to the episode proper to hear all about it, but Nima's story isn't out of the ordinary for some of our Muslim friends. There's been an increasing number of stories emerging from the Middle East of people just encountering Jesus in dreams, resulting in their conversion. It's a trend that left me both amazed and a little bit weirded out, I must say. As you can probably hear in the rewind, the whole episode creeped me out. In a good way. Back to 2023, Dixon, to wrap things up. Let me say I wasn't a fan of this topic. It was producer Kaylee's suggestion. Or was it director Mark?
It was Mark. It was Mark.
It was Mark. Oh, of course it was.
Good suggestion.
This is the sort of stuff I dream up.
Oh, that makes sense now. I just remember needing a whole lot of persuasion. I'm not exactly a cessationist. That's someone who thinks the miraculous spooky stuff in the Bible has ceased. But I'm pretty close to that view in practice. The history of this stuff, I love. The modern application, I'm not so sure. And I would hate it, dear listener, if you, after this episode, started to interrogate your dreams and tried to work out what God is saying to you. That's not the point of this episode. As far as I'm concerned, dreams are mostly accounted for by the stuff that Professor Foster told us at the top of the show. Sleep per se helps to sort out memory and cognition, and dreams in particular process our emotional life. But I've watched for years this phenomenon going on in Iran and elsewhere among Muslims. And I'm willing to admit, I think the real Jesus is appearing to people in their dreams. I can't believe I said that out loud. An Undeceptions podcast.